Close your eyes for a second and picture a Spanish conquistador. Go ahead. What do you see? You probably see a man with a thick, bushy beard. He is wearing one of those shiny pointed steel helmets called a morion. He has a breastplate reflecting the tropical sun, a heavy sword at his hip, and a giant cross embroidered on his chest. You see a man who sailed across a terrifying ocean from Spain to claim gold, glory, and God for the Spanish crown. You see a white European. But history is a master of selective memory. If you could go back in time to the year 1519 and walk through the camp of Hernán Cortés as he prepared to march on the great Aztec Empire, you would see something that would break your brain. There, standing right next to the legendary Cortés, leading horses and sharpening steel, is a man who fits every description of a conqueror, except for one thing. He is black. His name was Juan Garrido. To his friends, he was known as Handsome Johnny. He was not a slave. He was not a captive. He was a free man, a professional soldier, and a seeker of fortune. He was there when the first bricks of Mexico City were laid. He was there when the Aztec Emperor Montezuma II fell. And most importantly, he was the man who gave the entire American continent its first slice of bread. This is the story of the Black Conquistador that your history books conveniently forgot. Let us start with a mystery. There is an ancient document from the 16th century known as the Codex Azcatitlan. It is a series of illustrations created by indigenous artists to record the arrival of the Spaniards. In one of the most famous scenes, you see Cortés marching toward the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. It is a sea of metal and horses. But look closely at the man standing directly behind the leader. He is dark-skinned. He is holding the reins of a horse. He is wearing the same European clothing as everyone else. He is not in chains. He is not carrying baggage like a porter. He looks like he belongs. For centuries, historians looked at this image and shrugged it off. They assumed he was just an anonymous servant. But as researchers started digging into the old Spanish archives in Seville, a name started popping up over and over again in the payrolls and the legal petitions. Juan Garrido. Who was this man? We think his story begins somewhere on the West African coast around the year 1480. He was likely born into a family of high status, possibly royalty, because of the way he navigated the royal courts of Europe later in life. Somehow, as a young man, he made his way to Lisbon, Portugal. At the time, Lisbon was the most global city on the planet. It was a place where African gold and European steel met. Juan converted to Christianity, chose a Spanish name, and moved to Seville, Spain. Now, you have to understand the vibe in Spain at the dawn of the 1500s. It was like a biological gold rush. Everyone was talking about the strange lands across the sea. They talked about cities made of gold, fountains that made you young forever, and mountains of emeralds. Juan Garrido did not want to sit around in a dusty Spanish plaza watching life go by. He wanted in. He was a young man with a sword, a new religion, and a massive amount of ambition. He hopped on a ship and headed for the Caribbean. For the next 20 years, Juan was everywhere. If there was a fight, he was in it. If there was an exploration, his name was on the manifest. He spent time in his Pan-Iola, which is now the Dominican Republic and Haiti. He joined forces with Ponte de Leon. Yes, the guy who was obsessed with the Fountain of Youth. Juan was with him when they discovered Florida in 1513. Think about that for a second. One of the very first non-indigenous people to set foot in what is now the United States was a black man from West Africa. But his big break came in 1519. He joined the expedition of Hernán Cortés. This was the big one, the mission to take down the Aztec Empire. This was not a regular army. This was a group of mercenaries and adventurers. They were out for themselves. Juan Garrido was what the Spanish called an anondado, a foot soldier. He was a free man who provided his own weapons and armor in exchange for a share of the loot. He was an investor in the conquest. The march to Tenochtitlan was a nightmare of epic proportions. The Spaniards and their indigenous allies had to climb high mountain passes and fight through massive Aztec armies. They finally reached the capital, and it blew their minds. Tenochtitlan was a city built on a lake. It had floating gardens, giant pyramids, and clean streets. It was bigger and more organized than almost any city in Europe. Then, everything went wrong. The Aztecs rose up against the invaders in an event called La Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows. It was a bloodbath. The Spaniards tried to flee the city across the narrow stone causeways in the middle of the night, their pockets stuffed with stolen gold. They were weighed down by their greed. The Aztecs attacked from canoes, dragging soldiers into the dark water. Hundreds of Spaniards died that night. But somehow, Juan Garrido survived. Maybe he was faster, maybe he was stronger. Or maybe, as his nickname suggests, he was just too handsome to die. When the Spaniards finally regrouped and conquered the city in 1521, they found it in ruins. The streets were choked with bodies. Smallpox, the invisible ally of the Europeans, had decimated the population. Cortés ordered the city to be rebuilt as the new capital of New Spain. And here is where Juan Garrido does something truly fascinating. In the middle of this city of ghosts, on the very spot where so many of his comrades had died during that terrible night of retreat, Juan built a small chapel. It was called the Chapel of the Martyrs. It was his way of honoring the dead, but it was also a flag planted in the dirt. He was saying, I am here. I helped build this. I am a part of this new world. But being a soldier is a young man's game. As the fighting slowed down, Juan Garrido settled into the life of a citizen in the newly born Mexico City. He was granted a plot of land. He got married and had 3 children. He was the first black resident of Mexico City to be a homeowner. But his greatest contribution to history did not involve a sword. It involved a lunch bag. The legend goes that one day, Juan was cleaning out a sack of rice that had been sent over from Spain. As he shook out the dust, he noticed something strange. Tucked into the folds of the burlap were 3 tiny, dried-out grains. They were not rice. They were wheat. To anyone else, they were just trash. But Juan had an eye for potential. He took those 3 lonely seeds out to his small farm on the outskirts of the city. He cleared a patch of dirt and carefully pressed them into the soil. Imagine him standing there, this veteran of 100 battles, this survivor of the fountain of youth and the night of sorrows, leaning over a tiny patch of dirt, waiting for a sprout. And they did sprout. Those 3 seeds turned into a few stalks. Those stalks produced more seeds. He planted those, and soon he had a small field. Within a few years, those 3 accidental hitchhikers had become the ancestors of almost all the wheat in the Americas. Before Juan Garrido, there was no bread in the New World. There were tortillas, yes. There was corn, plenty of it. But the sandwich, the pizza crust, the morning toast, that all started in handsome John's garden. He changed the diet of a hemisphere because he was observant enough to find 3 seeds in a bag of rice. Now, you would think that a man who helped conquer Mexico and introduced wheat to the continent would be set for life. You would think he would be a national hero with statues in every plaza. But the world of the 16th century was a cruel place. As the colonial system hardened, it became more obsessed with race and lineage. The Spanish crown started to favor those born in Spain over those who had actually done the dirty work of conquest. In 1538, Juan Garrido was getting old. His wounds from the wars were aching. He was struggling to pay his bills. So he did what every aging conquistador did. He wrote a letter to the King of Spain. This document still exists in the archives. It is called a probanza. It is basically a 16th century resume. In it he lists his accomplishments. He writes, Juan Garrido, was the first to find the wheat in this land. I have been in every conquest and discovery. I served your majesty for 30 years without a salary. He was asking for a pension. He was asking to be recognized as the hero he was. The response from the king? Silence? He never got his pension. He died a few years later, relatively poor and largely ignored by the elite of the city he helped build. His name faded from the history books. The story of the conquest was rewritten as a purely white versus indigenous struggle. Men like Juan Garrido were inconvenient to that narrative. They proved that the birth of the Americas was not a simple clash of 2 worlds, but a messy, chaotic, multiracial collision from the very first day. But here's the thing. History can be buried, but it can never be completely erased. Every time you walk past a bakery and smell the scent of fresh bread, you are smelling the legacy of a West African man who refused to be just a bystander in history. Every time you see a painting of the conquest and notice the dark figure in the background, you are seeing a man who crossed the ocean, survived the fall of an empire, and planted the seeds of a new civilization. Juan Garrido was a conqueror. He was a survivor. He was a farmer. And he was a reminder that the truth is always more interesting than the lies we tell ourselves to keep things simple. He was Handsome Johnny, the man who brought bread to the table and blood to the field. He was the Black Conquistador, and it is about time we remembered his name. So next time someone tries to tell you that history is a black and white story, tell them about the 3 grains of wheat. Tell them about the man who stood behind Cortés. Tell them that the New World was built by people who came from every corner of the earth, searching for a better life and leaving behind a world that would never be the same again. Juan Garrido did not just watch history happen, he made it, and he did it with style. Stay curious, keep digging into those shadows. And remember that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one the painter tried to hide. History is full of ghosts, and it is our job to give them back their voices. Until next time, keep looking for the truth in the places they told you not to look. There is always more to the story. There is always another seed waiting to grow. There is always another legend waiting to be told. See you in the next one.